everybody, and welcome. I'm Filippo Lorenzin, and I am a curator of MoCDA. Today, I'm with Marie Chatel. She's also a curator of MoCDA, and we are here to host the second artist talk of MEMENTO MINTI, a special group show in Decentraland. We opened on the 8th of January, and that will close on Sunday, the 27th of March, featuring Jisoo Choi, Dance Batar, Silvio Lorusso, Nicolas, Sasson, and Sasha Styles. MEMENTO MINTI addresses the psychological and physical toll of narrating your life as if it were an online brand. Each of the artists involved in this exhibition has been exploring the thin line between self-promotion and online survival strategy as artists and creatives. The works on display propose an informed perspective on how marketing strategies have changed the way creatives promote and sell works online, inviting artists who have been active before and after the popularization of NFTs. Today, we meet two of the artists featured in the show to learn more about their practice and explore in deeper detail the themes at the center of the exhibition. Our first guest is Sasha Styles, a first-generation calm American poet, artist, and AI researcher probing the intersection of text and technology. Her cross-media work seeks to decipher the hidden language of a dawning Nova scene, fusing elements of semiotics, translation, computer science, speculative design, visual poetry, and conceptual art. Thanks for joining us, Sasha.
Our second
Pleasure
guest
to be here.
Welcome. So our second guest is Nicolas Sasson, a Franco-Canadian artist using early computer graphics to create pixelated forms, figures, moire patterns, and architectural structures. The sculptural, material, and pictorial qualities of early computer graphics, as well as their poetic limitations, drive his imagery. His work has been exhibited in numerous art institutions, including the Whitney Museum, Victoria and Albert Museum, and Centre Pompidou. Thanks for being with us, Nicolas.
Thank you for having me.
That's great. Can you... Yeah, please.
Yes, so our first question was if you could tell us, it's a question to both of you, could you tell us when and how, or even if you started using NFTs to promote your work?
Maybe we can start with Nicolas.
Sure.
If you want.
Sure, yeah, I can start. I don't know if I would say I used NFT to promote my work. I feel like I use Twitter and social media in general to promote my work. I'd say I use NFT as a way to sell my work. And I started in February of last year. I think the first NFT I minted was February 15, 2021. But it took me at least like 4 months before I made the decision. I became aware of different NFT platforms in the fall of 2020. And it was all like really opaque to me and unknown. So I took my time to try and learn a bit more about it before I finally made the decision to like mint my first NFT.
Thank you. Sasha?
Yeah. Again, thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here with Nicolas as well. So I've been making digital poetry for a long time now. I've been, writing conventional poetry my entire life pretty much. And, maybe over the past decade had started to experiment with using different digital tools to bring text to life in different ways. And I had been sort of doing that just for fun, for myself. I wasn't really able to send it out for publication really to too many places because the formats were somewhat experimental. Little animated, MP4s and little GIFs and things that didn't really have a good place to live in the majority of the poetry and literary magazines that I was reading and submitting to. So instead, I started posting them on Instagram. I wasn't even really on Twitter then. I had a Twitter account, but I wasn't really super active. So I was really just using Instagram as a place to share these these pieces with my friends, and really, you know, in addition to sharing them with friends and with others, I was doing it just to sort of create a record for myself and just have a place to put these things that wasn't just my hard drive. So, so that was that. And I, you know, through that process of just sort of creating these digital poems, I was invited to start participating in some online and digital art shows, which I never thought to do as a poet, really. But I had some very kind curators who came to me asking if I'd like to participate. So I did, and that sort of brought me into the metaverse. I had my first poetry commission in the metaverse in 2020. That introduced me to a lot of crypto artists and you know, folks who were already minting NFTs and who were doing a lot in that area. And it really opened my eyes to the possibilities for myself as a poet on the blockchain. And I started to realize that I could basically, you know, take a lot of what I'd been working on and posting on Instagram, and I could actually you know, self-publish it essentially on the blockchain, and you know, figure out new ways to sort of share it and promote it and even sell it. So that was the beginning of last year, beginning of 2021. And yeah, I haven't really looked back.
That's actually something that you mentioned in the interview featured in the catalog, isn't it, Sasha? You mentioned that you feel like your social platforms are a kind of augmented studio. I just love this term. I wonder if you could expand on this. So, for example, what role does the minting of your works play in your usual practice, for example?
Yeah, so it's an idea that you know, I'm sort of evolving and still sort of figuring out like really how to maximize the use of all these different social platforms. But I think for me, it's really, it's great to be able to do things across different platforms, you know, various social media as well as NFT and blockchain platforms, because you're able to sort of put work out to different audiences in different ways, and that invites a lot of different kinds of interactions. So, I mean, I've always sort of found actually that the you know, folks who are collecting my work are usually people that have gotten to know me and my work through Instagram and Twitter, because I use these channels to post a lot about the process and, you know, what I'm thinking about and sort of behind the scenes of the pieces and questions that I have for myself, or books that I'm reading that are inspiring specific works. And sort of, yeah, it's just kind of like a little tether, you know, line to my brain. So I like to kind of just do that kind of a brain dump and just share the inspirations behind everything that I'm working on. And social media in general has been really great for that. I think with NFTs in particular, it's been really wonderful for a number of reasons. Like one of which I think is that I actually get to start sharing different pieces of different stages of works that I'm doing, and sort of, you know, send them out. I can share things actually without even selling them, which is kind of cool. Share them with other people who are doing similar work, or, you know, collectors who are kind of interested in looking at different stages of work. I can, you know, mint things and then and actually just send them to someone, for example, as a way to interact with them, as a way to sort of participate and create a collaborative exchange of ideas, which I think has been sort of fun for me to do, rather than putting, you know, physical prints in the mail or whatever. It's fun just to be able to kind of start conversation and dialogue that way. And I think just documenting things, I think that's been a really important piece of minting on the blockchain for me too, is just being able to have, you know, essentially a you know, gallery for myself or a portfolio for myself on different platforms, where I can look back at sort of the timeline of when I was minting things, what I was thinking about then, you know, just kind of looking at the progression of different ideas through that sort of timestamp of, you know, of the certification in the blockchain. So that's been helpful, I think, for me as well. And yeah, I'll probably leave it at that.
Oh, thanks for saying that. What you just said reminded me of the mail art movement, where you had, you know, artists exchanging posts basically at the end of the day, and of course, you know, they made art out of that process. But of course, you can't look at what they did. We are talking about, for the ones who don't know that, mail art was a movement that was, I don't want to say popular, but let's say that, it was quite popular, let's say, maybe in the late 60s, early 70s, around that time. And looking at what they did at the time, you can't say that the process of communicating with other artists wasn't part of the work. So I wonder, Sasha, if you think that this connection with other people, with other artists, other creatives, is somehow plays somehow an important role in understanding your work as well. So basically, when I look at your work, should I take in account the fact that it's, I don't want to say the result, but it was the making of that work was informed by your experience, by your shared experience with other creatives, or do you think that's something that the public shouldn't be aware of because it's not that important?
That's a really great question. So I think to answer that, I also sort of want to sort of reiterate that I'm also coming at this as a poet, not necessarily just as an artist. I definitely think of myself primarily as a writer, and I'm used to being in environments like writers' workshops, where we are actively trading feedback and sending out drafts to first readers. And, there's a lot of collaborative spirit there, I guess, even though the stereotype of a writer is that, we're by ourselves in our room, with just a piece of paper, but there's a lot of collaborative spirit there. And I think one of my favorite things about being involved in the NFT world and in this crypto art realm is that there is this incredible sense of global community, and there's this really deep desire for people to connect and talk about work and talk about ideas and sort of look at ways that we can all sort of inspire each other and talk about context for what we're doing, talk about historical context, talk about, similarities and differences between art movements that have happened in the past and things that are happening right now. And I think all of that is just very enriching. To tie this back, I guess, to a lot of what I do in my practice, I work a lot with artificial intelligence, language, powered language models and natural language processing, where basically, you're able to tap into kind of the entirety of, human thought and speech via these massive language models that are trained on human data from all over the internet. And so for me, being able to participate in the crypto art culture is almost like being able to tap into this collective art consciousness, which I think as a writer, again, is so exciting to me to be able to do that, and has really led me to, radically rethink what poems are or what writing is, what literature is. And that has been incredibly exciting for me.
Thank you, Sasha. That was very interesting.
Yeah, great. So perhaps the next question will go to Nicolas. So in the interview, you mentioned that the works on display reference the computer screen as your main window to the world. Could you expand on this and the role you give to devices in your daily experiences?
Sure, yeah. Well, I guess pretty much everything I do is screen-based, so I've come to develop a sort of a particular relationship with screens. I think like the first thing I'm trying to refer to when I say that is just sort of the old analogy between an image and a window, and how this analogy kind of keeps happening with computer screens and with any sort of digital screen device. So I think a lot of what comes with that analogy gets reinterpreted or reactivated in my work, like notions of landscape, but also the act of contemplation, the act of projection into an image. There's sort of things I've always tried to kind of connect my physical experience of like looking out a window or looking out a landscape or contemplating on a specific scene, and how can these sort of experiences translate into a screen. And there's many reasons for that, but I think one of the most important reasons is to just sort of assert the importance of these devices in our lives, and also how usually screens have like a very utilitarian sort of aspect to them. It's like we work through screens, or we communicate through screens, or we just watch a movie through screens. But there's also, I think there's lots of space to be explored in terms of an aesthetic experience, or something that relates more to something that's not utilitarian, something that's not functional, something that's going to be just aesthetic, or I don't know, even like spiritual, or just something outside of that functional context. So I think that's one of the things I'm trying to refer to. And the other aspect is the fact that there is a part of my practice that has been exploring how a lot of my work can be scaled to architecture, and how I can project my work in space. So one of the important projects I've done in the past, called Wallpapers, in collaboration with Sarah Ludi and Sylvain Sailly, was a project that was actively exploring that. And so for the exhibition with MoCDA, Memento Minti, the series I worked on sort of re-explore certain ideas that we explored in Wallpapers, where an animation is created a little bit like a wallpaper pattern in the traditional sense, where the work is going to be used as an actual wallpaper. And so that refers both to, like a history of decorative arts, and a history of how this history of decorative arts get reactivated into the history of computer graphics, and how, in like early computer operating system, we had this sort of wallpaper desktop that were these sort of tiled images. So the 6 works in Memento Minti, called Out My Windows, they function like tiles. They're, as you can see right now, they are works that were conceived so they can be placed next to each other and create this sort of seamless wallpaper texture. And so, yeah, like, I think what's interesting to me is to explore this whole connection between architecture, between decorative arts, with abstraction as well, and how in the space of the screen you can have like these multiple spaces. You can have something that feels architectural, you can something that can feel very deep, you can have something that feels very flat. So I guess that has also to do with like the language of painting as well. But these are some of the ideas that kind of like triggered and informed the series.
Thank you.
Can I ask you, Nicolas, a very quick question? I'm sure it's a question that nobody ever asked you in your whole career as an artist. I just wonder, I don't want to say how do you make these animations, but like, what's the process? How do you like, how do you make basically animations? I'm just curious. If it's something, you feel comfortable to share with the public.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I feel comfortable sharing about it. So these particular works, they're a moire pattern. So they're actually very simple in the way they work. They're literally 2 images overlapping on top of another. And the overlapping of the 2 images creates the illusion of a third image. So moire pattern is something that has been like extensively explored in arts, especially in like optical art or kinetic art, like artists like Jesus Rafael Soto, for example, or Carlos Cruz Diaz. And it's something that happens a lot in the realm of the digital as well. It happens physically, like when you walk by a tennis court or a basketball court, and like the sort of the fence overlaps, and you sort of see this sort of visual artifact. But it's also something that happens in the digital space. And so when I create these animations, I basically overlap these different grids of hard edge pixel patterns, and I sort of stretch them, I distort them up to a certain point where I obtain the final animation. And that's kind of like the simple version of how I make them. And then there's like other steps. Like, for example, the animations in the exhibition here, originally they were grayscale animations. So like the background, the black and white component of the animation had like different shades of gray. And I sort of wanted to explore something a little bit more minimal visually, and more abstract, something that would become like very, 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 very minimal visual language. So it doesn't have a lot of visual information. And so there's that element, and then there's another element that comes on top of it, which is the colored sort of shapes that we see here, the blue one, there's the pink ones, which can be read as like just very simple abstract geometry, or can be read as a sort of reference to some sort of architectural feature. And so essentially it's images on top of images, which create the final animation.
I see. Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
To go back to the main themes of the exhibition, I would have a question for both of you. I would like to start first with Sasha, if you are available. I wonder if there are any specific behaviors in the contemporary art scene that makes you somehow anxious. For example, do you feel increasing pressure as an artist and as a writer, or as a writer since NFTs became, so popular, or not? For example, maybe the answer is no, and I hope it's not.
The answer is definitely not no. I was really happy to be invited to be part of this exhibition on these themes, because it's something that I've been grappling with. And really just trying to come to terms with, I guess. I think, it's a really, really exciting and exhilarating place to be. This, this sort of online realm and sort of this culture of making art on the blockchain is so exhilarating, and I'm really inspired and energized by so much of what is happening. So there's certainly an upside to that, and there's also the sense that, working quickly has allowed me to feel a little bit less precious about some of the things that I'm doing. So that actually, there are upsides to the pace, I think, and to the sort of the overall vibe in the environment. But I think, for the most part, it's been a little bit of a struggle to sort of adapt to some of the pacing in this space, and this, sort of feeling like, on the one hand, you kind of have to be on Twitter, I think, if you want to be in the crypto art world, right? And you sort of need to be on Discord, and you kind of need to be plugged into various communities in different ways, and kind of always be available and engaged to make the most of it. I found that, I'm putting a lot of time into all these things. I'm getting a huge amount out of it as well. In fact, I think to some extent, the more I put in, the more fun it is, the more I learn, the more artists and writers and technologists I'm meeting and getting to sort of, dream up new ideas with. But at the same time, I do feel a little bit, that we're all spread thinner than we might like to be, which is, of course, not a new thought. I think we're all kind of experiencing this now, but I do feel drawn in lots of different directions. And because there are all of these amazing things happening in this zone where we're all living in, I constantly find my mind sort of going in this direction, this direction. And I want to chase after all these, all these ideas that are popping into my head because of it. But what I really need to get better at is sort of training myself to go in one direction, and and really kind of go deep. And I think, again, this is where I feel that there's something nice about I think my experience as a writer and as an artist as well. I can kind of lean back into what writing is for me, which is like a pure concentrated flow state, where I can, if I'm feeling really overwhelmed, as I often do, then I can, think about a poem that I want to write and just sort of let myself go in that direction. And I find myself, usually getting totally sucked into it, and all the distractions that are sort of behind the screen do kind of fade for me. And I can be in that zone for a couple of hours and sort of look up and not realize that time has passed. So I think that's always nice for me to be able to still like tap into that. It's kind of my, my happy space. So I think that's been really helpful. And then the other thing that's been helpful to me in terms of navigating some of the stresses and pressures of being in this space is to realize that I don't need to sell things just because I mint them, and I also don't need to mint everything. I mean, when I first started, I think I was really taken in by the novelty of a lot of you know, what being on the blockchain entails for artists and writers, and I was sort of tempted to do a lot. And I think the longer that I'm in it, the more I realize that you know, I can mint something and it could just be for me. It could just be something that I want to put there, so it's in my, you know, my portfolio and my timeline. Or I can just mint things so I can like give them to my friends or people who are interested in my work. I don't need to mint something and then figure out where to drop it, or you know, put the pressure on myself to sell it for a certain amount. So I think that's something. Yeah, it's been a little bit of course, a struggle when you're in this zone, looking around and kind of looking at the pressure that we're all feeling. But do try to take a giant step back as much as I can.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Sasha. What do you say, Nicola? Is it the same for you? Did you find the right balance between, you know, mental health and NFTs, or?
I'm still working on it. Yeah, I mean, just to go back to your question, there's definitely been a lot of behaviors and aspects of like the contemporary art world that I have found like very, very toxic and very stressful. And I think one aspect being that it just never felt like there were enough opportunities for everybody, and so that created specific behaviors that were either extractive or problematic on many aspects, and just generated a lot of sort of you know, a lot of negative feelings for a lot of artists, because when there's not enough opportunities, well, people don't get opportunities and they feel like failures. And so I think NFTs have been like very like incredible for that, because all of a sudden there were a lot of opportunities, and also a lot of behaviors were completely different. Since last year, since I've started working with NFTs, I've met so many incredible artists, so many inspiring creatives, but also I've noticed very, very, very different behaviors, because there were so many, and there still are so many opportunities in the space. There's been a lot more of like mutual support. There's been a lot more of wealth redistribution. There's been a lot more of, you know, artists helping other artists. And so that aspect has been sort of life-changing for me, and I think for a bunch of other people, and trying to sort of push on that culture of mutual support and wealth redistribution has been something that's been on my mind since the very beginning, and how to find ways to really sort of establish that culture, because I think it's something that exists in the contemporary art world, but unfortunately there's not enough you know, there's not enough funding, there's not enough money to like make it fully sustainable. And some pockets of people have found ways to make it sustainable, but it's, as a general rule, it is not sustainable. And so can it be sustainable in, you know, in Web3, in the crypto space with NFTs? That's something that I think is really, really interesting. And then like, as far as, you know, entering the NFT space and dealing with new stressful aspects, for sure, it's been kind of I mean, I've always had these sort of strategies of trying to work in many different fields, in the contemporary art world, in electronic music, in fashion, in architecture, and sort of like not put all my eggs in the same basket. And last year I did the complete opposite. I went completely like 100% into NFTs, and it's been incredible, but it also like brought a lot of different sets of how to create a balance, and how to like not burn out spending 10 hours a day on Twitter trying to see everything that is happening, how to sort of like pace oneself and look at a broader picture in terms of like, well, the work can exist as NFTs, but also, you know, can the work exist as an exhibition? What is the purpose behind the work? How should it exist? What is the purpose I want to push as an artist? And all of these questions, I'm slowly getting back to them now after the rush that last year was, and they're very much still in the process of being sorted, and I don't think they're going to get sorted right away. It's going to be a work in progress over several years.
This actually very nicely connects to the last questions we wanted to ask both of you. which is how do you balance the production of Nsts with working with other media, whether digital or working with analog formats, and if there are suggestions you'd like to make so that people are not overwhelmed by being on trend.
Well, you know, for me, I think my whole practice is sort of straddling the line between the analog and the digital to begin with. So I've always done a lot of work that involves, you know, this kind of back and forth between nature and technology, between, you know, the virtual and the tangible. And I think that's been something that for me has been kind of a saving grace of getting into this space and sort of maintaining some sort of balance. So you know, I think naturally I'm drawn to that, you know, that sort of dichotomy. And so I will always find that if I am spending too much time on my computer, if I'm spending too much time, you know, thinking about minting, or, you know, I'm sucked into the Twitter world, I will kind of inevitably just, you know, sort of be drawn back outside and, you know, back into a project like analog binary code, where I'm taking elements of nature and trying to code in binary outside, not at a computer. So I think for me, like, that's just sort of an innate tendency that I have. And I think that's always been a bit of a reaction against just how, you know, how badly I think I feel when I spend too much time, you know, in this one sort of virtual realm. So I think, yeah, it's helpful for me to remember, just again, it's good to be objective. It's good to sort of remain objective in some ways and kind of take a step back and just remind yourself that, you know, when you're in the thick of it, you know, you do feel sucked in, you do feel like it's the only thing that's happening, but it's not the only thing happening in the world. And so it can feel like we're in this bubble of, you know, in this NFT bubble, but it really is not, it's not inevitable that we remain there. So I just constantly sort of remind myself to, you know, to leave and to kind of look at it from the outside a bit and to do things in other realms. And I think that has certainly been helpful in terms of also the way that I'm creating art in different formats now. I mean, I will, you know, I quite often, like the pieces that I have in this show, I will quite often do a lot of quote unquote digital work in an analog format. For example, the pieces that are on exhibition as part of Memento Minti are in cursive binary, which is my sort of my transhuman language that combines computer code and my handwriting. And these are actually pieces that are, you know, they are handwritten on paper, you know, with colored pencil and with Conti crayon and actual materials. And to me, like, it's nice to be able to do things like that and then sort of put them into the metaversal realm. And one of the things I like the most about seeing this show, the way that it's exhibited here, is that funny kind of juxtaposition of the quote unquote real world with, you know, what's happening in this world of pixels and bright colors. And it's just, I think for me, like, that feels like a good place to be in, this kind of, you know, weird sort of threshold where it's all merging together. And so I still, you know, do quite a lot of that. I will do a lot of hand coding in a literal sense. I will do a lot of, you know, painting, and I have a studio partner and we do a lot of like physical work in the studio. And, you know, even with a lot of the multimedia poems that I work on, they're created, you know, as MP4s, with, you know, spoken word, with visual animations as videos. But I also like to kind of take them, you know, out of the realm of just, you know, my computer screen, and figure out how can it be made more tangible, I guess. Like, how can you take a poem and maybe turn it into, you know, an installation, like an immersive experience. I've been lucky to work with a few curators who've helped me do that. For example, by taking, you know, a poem and then projection mapping it on the side of a building or something like that. So to me, like, I love exploring that duality, and that's kind of what keeps me sane in this area, is, you know, playing so much with these digital tools and thinking about the future and thinking about, you know, about all these, you know, virtual modes of existence. And a lot of my work really is about, you know, post-humanism. But at the same time, sort of coming back to, you know, we are still flesh and blood beings in this, increasingly virtual world, and what does that mean? And really just using all of these different tools that are at our disposal to kind of probe the tension between the physical and the virtual. And instead of maybe getting stressed by the fact that it's hard to mediate between the two, I kind of lean into that and just make that the focus of a lot of the work that I'm doing and a lot of the poetry that I write.
And so as you produce works analog and work on these poems, and it has this very tangible nature, how do you feel about the pace of production? Because for me, like the NFT space has also intensified the pressure to produce faster.
Mm-hmm.
And when I compare the producing works online versus, or showing new works online versus in a tangible world, it feels like there's so much more pressure there.
Yeah. I'm afraid I don't know that I have very good advice, because I don't even have very good advice myself about this. I mean, in the beginning, I was trying to sort of keep up a little bit more. And I think at this point, I feel like I'm failing a little bit to sort of stay, stay fresh and stay current with what everybody else is doing. I actually come from a background in brand strategy and advertising. That's sort of been like my professional livelihood. And it's really interesting to me because I bring a lot of that here and think about, how you build a brand, how you create product, how you distribute product, how you plan drops, how you plan campaigns and product strategy and things like that. So I see so much of the value in that for so many artists who are very successful in this space. And at the same time, I think I personally am quite resistant to doing that in my creative practice, having been so steeped in it from a commercial and professional side. So I think, in the beginning, I was trying to be a little bit more, I guess, strategic in terms of how I produce work and where I would produce it, what platform it might go on, how I would coordinate the drop, and how to amplify it on Twitter and things like that. And I think I just got sick of thinking of it that way, because I don't have a grand, plan for what I'm doing with my art. This is all, for me, the fun of it is that I get to explore and I get to just change my mind at the last second. And, if I'm working on a project and I just don't feel like it's working, I don't want to pressure myself to finish it just because I've committed to doing, a drop on a certain date or something. So I think, that's not what everyone probably wants to hear, because maybe that's not the recipe for being financially successful as an artist. But to me, it's made me a lot happier as an artist to remove myself a bit from that feeling that this is just, this relentless machine.
What about you, Nicolas?
I mean, I also feel like it's hard to give really like tangible advice on this question, because as Sasha said, it's different for everybody. Everybody comes with a different practice, with a different set of problematics. Some people are trying to like make a living like 100% as an artist. Some people have a day job that they have to deal with. Some people have family life that they have to deal with. Some people have like kids that they need to take care of. So I think it really is like a case by case scenario. For me, my personal experience is that I'm still very new to this space. I'm still very new to understanding how it impacts my practice overall. It impacts the rhythm in which that I use for my work. And last year was sort of a lot of like a big learning experience, basically, on like what seems to work, what seems to doesn't work. And so my general advice would be like very generic and simple things about like trying to pace oneself, trying to like not lose track of what are the real goals behind the work. And again, some people will come at it with very different perspectives. Some people will come at it with a very like career-minded perspective, where they're here to make money and they're here to like sort of sustain themselves, and the art is like really important, but it's the financial aspect is like equally important. Some other people will look at it as a way to extend their practice in a more meaningful way, and will sort of prioritize meaning and prioritize exciting project rather than the financial aspect. And I think every sort of perspective and path is just as valid as another. It really depends on where you're coming from. And for me, I'm more trying to create this balance between what Sasha was saying, like the time I spent online trying to promote my work, trying to define how much time I should spend online trying to promote my work, trying to figure out what are the best times of the day for me to really focus on a project, trying to think back into, well, do I want to do more exhibitions? Do I want to work more on projects that are outside of the NFT space? Because for the last 12 months, I've been really focused on NFTs almost like 100%. And now I'm trying to think of, well, maybe I want to do something that doesn't involve NFT. Maybe I want to go back to making sculptures. Maybe I want to go back to working on social events. So yeah, like the advices are really hard because everybody comes from a different place. And my personal experience is really that I'm not really good at giving myself advice on this question, so I don't feel that comfortable giving anybody else advice. But what I would say is that I noticed a lot of mutual support in this space. And I talk about this a lot with a lot of friends one-on-one on Twitter and through chats. And we sort of try to like run each other's experience against each other and see what works and what doesn't. And, I feel like some people are really sort of good at being structured in the way they compartment everything. I'm not one of them. I'm definitely sort of like all or nothing when I work on things. And I think like the best thing is to really try and create this circle of mutual support around you, to like be good to some other people that, are going to be good to you, and have this sort of mutual support network. Because when things are good, you're fine and you're doing your thing. But when things are not good, it's really important to have, I think, people that you can fall back onto that can pick you back up and help you go through like the hard times. And I think that's something that's true for any space, really, not just the NFT space.
I would say both, as you said, both online and offline at the end of the day, isn't it? Sasha?
Oh, yeah, no, I agree. I was just, as Nicolas was speaking, I was just thinking that, and I agree with everything that's just been said, but I was also just thinking that, I think part of what's been helpful for me too, and for a lot of my friends in this zone, is also to sometimes lean into the pressure a little bit and realize like what good things can come out of the pressure. So for example, for me, I'm not the best with finishing unless I have a deadline, for example. I will rewrite something until I can't rewrite it anymore, and it's hard for me sometimes to say, okay, this is ready now, and I'll put it out into the world. So sometimes this is just sort of maybe contradicting or complicating what I was saying earlier, but sometimes I do actually feel like there is that aspect of the speed and the pace and the pressures of the space that are actually helpful in terms of forcing you to kind of formulate your thoughts and your work, and then putting it out into the world and into conversation in a way that maybe wouldn't be possible otherwise. And I think it's also true in terms of even thinking about how to talk about your work, or how to, think through, conceptually what it is that you're working on. Sometimes it does take, the deadline of a show coming up or a drop or something to kind of buckle down and say, I'm going to sit and now just think through what is the question that I'm asking myself with this particular project. Not to say you have to come up with all the answers, but sometimes it is good to have those external forces giving you a little bit of that gentle nudge, which I know that I myself need.
And on this note, I want to thank you both, Sasha and Nicolas, for this talk. It was a pleasure to meet you and learn more about your research. So seriously, thanks again, both for collaborating with me and the rest of MoCDA to Memento Minti, but also for your availability. It was really a pleasure to meet you this evening here in Europe, but in this morning if you are, I suppose, in America. Before leaving you, I would like to remind our lovely public you can learn more about the exhibition and the featured artist by ordering your copy of the catalog, featuring 2 introductions written by Marie and I, followed by special interviews with the artist. As you can imagine, you can find a link on MoCDA's website. One very last thing, please, as I mentioned, at the beginning of this call, this talk. Please don't miss the chance to visit the exhibition in the Decentraland, because the show will close on Sunday, the 27th of March. So you still have, how much, 2 weeks and a half, 1 week and a half, 14 days, I would say, probably more. Let's say almost 2 weeks. Sorry, yes, sorry about that. I don't have my calendar next to me. Sorry about that. Again, please find the link on MoCDA's website and our social media profiles. You can't get wrong. And if you can't find it, please ask us, because of course, you know, the more people see the exhibition in the Decentraland, the merrier we are. And of course, both the work of Nicolas and Sasha are, I'm 100% sure that the work, your work, Nicolas, is on your website as well. Am I wrong?
It's not on my website, but it's on object.com.
Here we go. And I'm sure, Sasha, that you minted your works, isn't it?
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah, I think they're on OpenSea. I'll try to tweet about them as well.
Here we go. So yeah, you know, please follow MoCDA's social profiles to receive updates about our future exhibitions. And I'm saying this with a smile, because as soon after we close MEMENTO MINTI, we will open a brand new exhibition. And as you can see, Marie is smiling. I don't know if she's enthusiastic, happy, or terrified. But I don't want to spoil the surprise. We will talk about this another time.
Time will tell.
Thanks again, everybody. Take care of yourselves. Bye. Enjoy the rest of your day, evening, afternoon, wherever you are, night. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Have a great evening. Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.